What's going on, everybody? I'm back with another video. This video is going to be looking at Manchester City and how they beat Leicester in the English Premier League on Boxing Day. Now, before we get into the tactics behind the match, be sure to check out both my books. They're online on Amazon, and there's links to both of them in the description below. Be sure to check out the books, and let's get right into the tactics of the video. So now Manchester City built from the back with their four-man initial build-up shape. And then they went with a diamond in their midfield structure, occupying each of the central corridors, using four players with Fernandinho at the base of this shape. Now their width was held by Sterling and Riyad Mahrez, holding full width, while the midfield looked to create superiority, whether that was numerically going through the center, or if they influenced the defense in a certain way, to then open up space in the wide area. So Leicester, they went with a 4-2-3-1, which often saw their wide midfielders advance and look to press against the deeper fullbacks of Manchester City. So what this did, it left the double pivot, as we see here, a little bit less supported from their wide midfielders, leaving them a little bit more exposed to the three-man attacking midfield shape of Manchester City. And in the first half, we see Leicester go with a four-man back line, which would then change to a five-man back line in the second half, which helped them defend in the wide areas a little bit better and allowed them to then get a hold of the match in the first 10 to 15 to 20 minutes of the second half. Now, with the movements in Manchester City, they often saw Zinchenko come into a more narrow position, especially in the second half. With the midfield influencing the central three corridors, this was a main source of their movement. So either they had the ability to fan into the wide area, drop deeper, and allow players like Raheem Sterling to make inverted runs and hopefully influence the defense to either react in more of a narrow way or get pulled out into the wide area as the ball is circulated, and then this creates then the space in behind to attack through. And the players in the midfield also determined some of their own roles, whether they were pinning, playing between the defenders, looking to affect multiple of these players, or whether they were looked to then progress via the wide area, going around the block with maybe Kevin De Bruyne coming into the wider area, allowing Riyad Mahrez to invert like we just saw on the weak-hand side. But this would allow then Kevin De Bruyne to use his qualities to then play balls in diagonally towards goal for runners in behind. And with Fernandinho at the base, it gave Manchester City a lot of flexibility on when players could invert. So with Zinchenko, they could then go within single width and out single width on this left-hand side with Raheem Sterling, allowing Zinchenko to invert and try to affect the wide midfielder to then force Leicester to play in a more narrow midfield way, which would then open up more avenues for players to drop into, come deeper, and then it would force the defense to make decisions on who they should drop to and who they should step to. Now in the second half, Iosi Perez was subbed off, and instead of bringing on a wide midfielder, they brought on Castagna, who then slotted in as a right central defender, allowing then Leicester City to go with a back five and a four-man midfield, which gave them a little bit more control, and it gave them more control when they were able to jump into the midfield areas, because with just the double pivot in the first half, the three-man attacking midfielders of Manchester City often exposed the double pivot when their wide midfielders in their 4-2-3-1 would jump. But now with the back five, they had more security defensively in these central areas. It also gave them a lot more security in wide areas. So now for Manchester City, Zinchenko inverted a lot more when this change happened. So this was primarily to try and re-isolate the wide areas, because then with Sterling against the back five, they have the wing backs that can easily go out and press Sterling. They then have more cover from three central defenders and free midfielders to then gain compactness and control over Manchester City in these areas. Also, if Zinchenko were to stay wide, it would allow Leicester to press Manchester City easier, and with their three central defenders, it gave the central defenders more freedom to then jump into the space between the lines to limit the access of a free player being created, and Leicester would still be able to create a +1 or +2 numerical advantage in their last line of defense giving them stability when they go and try and win the ball back. But with the idea of Zinchenko inverting, it would try and affect Leicester City's midfield, whether it would draw out a center mid to then create space between the lines, or it would narrow the wide midfielder or James Maddison of Leicester City to then overcompensate for this to then open up space for players like Raheem Sterling and then create space in behind. But that's going to wrap up the analysis. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.